what's your name?
Keith.
Keith?
Yeah, I'm a librarian.
Oh, you're a librarian.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Been working there on and off 10 to 12 years. Prior to that, I was a sword for hire.
A sword for hire?
Yeah, that's right.
What does a sword for hire do?
Well, like local landowners such as, barons, lords and the like, they will say to me, well, we need someone killing over there, or we've got a dragon or something like that needs taken care of. Can you do that? And it was good, but it was the work was a bit hand to mouth, in terms of pay, and of course on top of that, you got no job security.
Yes. You just missed the coolest dude ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Was he a librarian whose character was a little bit ill-defined?
Yes. He was amazing.
A little bit kind of
Such
ill-defined.
an interesting guy.
Really?
Yeah, he was.
His character was sort of like a slightly dull librarian, but I wasn't. He
wasn't.
I wasn't
dull
sure
at
what
all.
exactly he was meant to be. Hashtag.
That made me go funny.
What the fuck? Well, hashtag more Keith the librarian. If you'd like to see him come back, because I'm not 100% sure. So, Fighting Fantasy. I did my GCSE. It was actually O-level, because I did the last year of O-levels. On Death Trap Dungeon, which
is not this book.
Which is not this book. This is the first one in the series, albeit not an original. Yeah, and I did that because I thought, well, I don't have to read a whole book for my end of term project.
Yeah.
And I got a B, so...
That's pretty good going.
Yeah. Is that right? I don't know. I'm giving two fingers up to. Give two fingers up to my English teacher.
Oh, or to
lovely.
the education
To the
system.
education, yeah.
Well, even though they're the ones that gave you a B, so they were happy with
Oh.
that, with your work.
Anyway, we're gonna.
Well, I have to say, I loved fighting fantasy books. I loved choose your own adventure books as a genre as a kid.
Yes.
I had loads of them, but we didn't have many fighting fantasy books. We only had like 3 or something in our school library, primary
I
school.
don't think we had any in our school library.
Oh, but when I found them, I don't know if I found them or another kid found them and showed them to me, and I was just like blown away that something like this could exist, and then so disappointed that our library only had 3.
Being a nerdy, geeky child, and I love my Dungeons and Dragons. For me, it was being able to play sort of Dungeons and Dragons without having to leave the house, which is something I've always...
It's what you aspire to. Activities that you don't need to leave the house for.
I used to have to go around Murray Haynes' house to play Dungeons and Dragons, and, this meant I didn't have to.
In the special report, we will be examining how through music, movies, magazines, television, and games, fantasy appears to be exploding into our culture today.
Youth Probe presents The Fantasy Explosion. In this presentation, you will hear from our guest commentators, Winky Pratney, 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 Winky
Pratney. I want to get kids involved in the art club.
Winky Pratney.
Should we dip into it?
Oh, Alanasia.
So I believe most of the books were set in a shared world.
Icefinger Mountains.
You've got the Ice Stone Bridge, Moonstone Hills, Kragan Heights.
Oyster Bay. Dogfish Island.
Oyster Bay sounds like a fish and chip restaurant.
Oh no, maybe there is a fish and chip restaurant there.
Called Oyster Bay. I bet there is an Oyster Bay fish and chip shop.
I wonder if Keith recognises this land.
Yes, if only he was here to share the screen with both of us. My favourite books to stack are the reference books, the large reference books.
Because they're easier to stack.
No, I like the heft of them.
Oh.
I like how heavy they are.
What's the highest stack you've ever stacked?
Oh, probably about 4.5 to 5 feet.
Wow, that must have taken a lot of books.
It did, yeah. I mean, most of the reference section, and then of course the chief librarian, she came over to me. She said, "What do you think you're doing?"
Oh, so you weren't given permission to stack the books?
No, she said you need to put those.
Your job description.
Well, when they say where this is going. When they say stack them and put them back on the shelves, my understanding was what a stack is to stack them up high vertically.
That would be my definition of a stack.
But a stack is the rows of the shelves that the books go on, you see.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, so what, you were going around the library just creating loads of piles of books everywhere?
Yeah, I did it, first of all, I did it in the kids section. I did it in romantic fiction. And then she finally caught up with me in the reference book section.
Right.
And so I said, why are you doing this? And I said, well, I don't know. You asked me to stack the books. And I've enjoyed it. I admit I've enjoyed it. But it's not what you want me to do, no? And she said, no, of course not. It'd be ridiculous. How are people going to, if they want one of the books that are on the bottom of the stack, how are they supposed to get that out without knocking the entire stack over? And I said, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Oh, she made a good point.
She did make a good point, but it's the way she made it. It's, she does.
Do you have a bit of a not quite so harmonious relationship with her? Then?
Yeah, I think she's
detecting a bit of potential conflict.
I mean, I don't want to jeopardise my job, but she does. She's been there. Let's put it this way: she's been there a long time. She's got her way of doing things. I came in with some new ideas that she didn't necessarily see eye to eye with.
Forest of spiders. No thanks.
Not oak wood. Right, how will you start?
Hang on. Chiang Mai? That's like an actual real place in this world.
Oh, and Genghis
Khan.
So yeah, I think it was all, the books were generally set in a shared universe. So although there were some that weren't, and of course there were a few sci-fi ones. One of my favourites was...
What, actual fighting fantasy sci-fi ones?
Yeah. One of my favourites was a kind of Mad Max post-apocalyptic one.
No way!
Yeah, let me show you the cover for that one. Freeway Fighter, I loved that one.
That is such an 80s cover.
Yeah.
I think I read that!
Really? Vault of the Vampire.
Oh my god. This is... My brain is exploding. I think I read that.
You don't remember what the other ones were?
No,
Well,
I'll see if I can recognise any of the
Let's have a quick look at the covers, because some of them are better than others. And although all of them are better than that. Sorry.
No, don't be mean to it.
Look, I'm not knocking the art there, but come on.
Well, what's it about? Let's see. Are you brave enough to take on the monsters and magic of Firetop Mountain? The powerful warlock Zagor must be slain, but first you'll need to make it through the caverns of his mountain stronghold. Many adventurers before you have taken a wrong turn in the maze and perished at the hands and claws of the warlock's gruesome servants. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a wizard that looked like that. I looked like an old man with white hair and a beard.
Well, it's never too late to fulfill your dreams.
AKA God.
That was,
Forest of Doom.
That was one of my favourite covers. I mean, look at it. They're brilliant.
That's amazing.
They're such lovely covers.
What happened? What was the Forest of Doom about?
I don't remember.
City of Thieves looks for... I think that might be a book I've read.
Yeah, with a head on a spike.
City of Thieves, maybe I'd have to see what it was about.
For instance, I thought, well, what would be fun? We could have like some special evenings. Like we could have a book club.
That's great in a library.
You'd think
perfect.
So, she said, well, that's all really good. But the problem is, you see, A, you'd have to do that unpaid, Keith. B, then there's the whole issue of who's going to lock up. There's also... You've got to keep the lights on for that time. Someone has to be there to supervise. And she said, I'm not prepared to do that.
Oh, I see.
And she said, you're not senior enough that I trust you yet to supervise the library after hours.
Right.
So that idea never came to pass.
Oh, and that's really stayed with you.
Well, it's one among other things.
Oh, what other things have there been?
Well, another time she put a curse on me.
Of course, these books, they got caught up in the satanic panic that happened in the 80s.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because...
And I quote...
There were concerns that the books were leading to moral corruption and encouraging children to dabble in the occult. The controversy began when conservative Christian groups accused the books of promoting witchcraft, Satanism and other forms of paganism. They argued that the books could lead children down a dangerous path, encouraging them to experiment with magic and other occult practices. Some Christian groups even organised book burnings and public protests against the books. The controversy was not limited to Christian groups, as some teachers and parents also expressed concerns. They argued that the books were too violent and could desensitise children to violence and killing. In response to the controversy, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone wrote letters to newspapers and made public statements denying any connection to the occult or promoting witchcraft. They argued that the books were simply harmless fantasy stories that encouraged reading and imagination. In fact, I believe the outcry even helped the sales.
I bet it did.
Classic style.
Yeah, of course.
Like the band songs that go to number one in the
Yeah,
chart.
everyone wanted to read the books then.
Yeah.
Did you find the books led you down a dangerous path?
Yeah. God, so many people I killed back in the 80s. All because of these books.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, I turned to witchcraft after reading these books when I was 10.
I kicked a dog.
May I suggest some things that you need to watch for you with your children? Number one is the heavy metal music like AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne. These people are dangerous.
Fantasy involvement games, that's another area as well that poses a very great threat to sucking people into the occult.
James Allen Kirby, 14 years old, charged with killing his junior high school principal and wounding 3 other people. Police are blaming D&D.
This was my one. This is my favourite, Death Trap Dungeon, which I went through this so many times.
Okay, why did I look at
Oh,
that?
you don't like it because it's got the eyes.
Why did I look at that?
Okay, look, it's such a cool picture.
It's not a cool picture. It's covered in clusters.
Look at its massive swollen stomach. Look at that.
The stomach's cool.
Looks like it's going to burst.
The stomach is cool. The millions of eyes atop its head are uncool.
I've got a beef for that.
I don't need to see it. Can we move on to the next,
Lion of the Lizard
please?
King, another great cover.
Nice. Who drew the covers? Do you know? Was it always the same person, or was it?
No, it definitely wasn't the same person. Definitely wasn't the same person who did all of them.
What makes you think that it was her that put the curse on you?
I saw her muttering at the desk.
All right,
as
let's
I went past.
replay the scene for me.
Yeah,
We're in the library.
that's right.
She's at her desk.
Yeah.
You're walking past.
Yeah.
And then you show me what she was doing. That was curse-like.
She was stamping the books.
Right.
Like stamping them in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And she was going... Exactly like a witch would. Are you allowed to say witch these days? I mean, that is what they are. You know, green, hook nose,
Right.
pointy hat.
Yeah.
But they can conceal their identities by appearing to look normal.
Like a librarian,
I mean,
maybe.
she does look that normal, if you know what I mean. I mean, that hair.
But I'm okay. No need to be judgmental. People can wear their hair however they prefer.
You haven't seen it. You haven't seen it.
How will you start the adventure? If you're new to Fighting Fantasy, it's good to read through the rules. Never read the rules.
What? No, always read the rules so you know what you're doing.
Never read the rules. We're just gonna
Always
start.
read the rules.
Never read the rules. So, at last your 2-day hike is over. You unsheathe your sword, lay it on the ground, and sigh with relief as you lower yourself down onto the mossy rocks to sit for a moment's rest. You stretch, rub your eyes, and finally look up at Firetop Mountain. The very mountain itself looks menacing. The steep face in front of you looks to have been savaged by the claws of some gargantuan beast. Look.
Ooh.
Sharp rocky crags jut out at unnatural angles. At the top of the mountain you can see the eerie red colouring. Probably some strange vegetation. which has given the mountain its name. Perhaps no one will ever know exactly what grows up there, as climbing the peak must surely be impossible. See, it's brilliant. It's so evocative, these books, and then you're in them.
You're in that world.
You get to...
You're part of that world.
Yeah. Your quest lies ahead of you. Across the clearing is a dark cave entrance. You pick up your sword, get to your feet, and consider what dangers may lie ahead of you. But with determination, you thrust the sword home into its scabbard and approach the cave. You peer into the gloom to see dark, slimy walls with pools of water on the stone floor in front of you. The air is cold and dank. You light your lantern and step warily into the blackness. Cobwebs brush your face, and you hear the scurrying of tiny feet. Rats, most likely. You set off into the cave. After a few yards, you arrive at a junction, Sanya. Will you turn west, turn to page 71, or east, turn to 278?
West or east, west or east. Turn east.
All right, 278. The passageway soon comes to an end at a locked wooden door. You listen at the door but hear nothing. Will you try to charge the door down? If so, turn to 156. If you would rather turn around and go back the way you came, turn to 92.
I think, what's the point of coming all this way if we don't try and charge the door down?
Jaw.
Don't you think?
Yeah, okay, 156 then. I've forgotten how good these were.
Yeah, they're
I've forgotten how much I love these. You charge the door with your shoulder, roll 2 dice. If the number rolled is less than or equal to your skill score, you succeed. Okay.
We don't have a skill score.
Oh, we didn't do that, did we? Okay, let's find more. If your number rolled is greater than your skill, you rub your bruised shoulder and decide against trying again. Well, let's say you did it, shall we?
Turn to 92 to return to the
No,
junction.
343. You knocked it down
Oh, yes.
with your skill score.
Cool.
The door bursts open and you fall headlong into a room, but your heart jumps as you realise you are not landing on the floor, but plunging down a pit of some kind. Luckily, the pit is not particularly deep and you land in a heap less than 2 metres down. Lose 1 stamina point for your bruises.
Oh, I forgot there was that aspect to the book.
Yes.
That was all part of the fun. Like, you so feel that you're part of it. It's
Well, yeah,
so
you-
much more
character- God, you
engaging.
would have loved Dungeons and Dragons, Sonia.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know anyone who played it.
Has it got a character sheet? Where do you do the character creation? Probably should have read the rules.
Rules.
Why did you tell me not to read the rules?
I don't know, just like, who needs rules?
Oh, adventure sheets at the back. So there you go.
Ah, cool.
Equipment and posters. You start your adventure with a sword, leather armor, shield. Anyway, we're not going to go through
There
the
you
whole
go.
thing, as
Yeah.
we want to get on, and my shirt's inside out.
Ooh, wheel.
Woo-hoo.
Is that?
You know, she even, she said to me as well, she said, for my first day, she said, have you got any tattoos? I said, I don't see what business that is of yours.
Does she have any tattoos?
Well, I wouldn't know. The woman wears, is buttoned up right to her jaw.
She might be a
wouldn't
fan
know.
of tattoos. She might have wanted to.
No, she
Create
wasn't. She said because we
conversation
don't
with you.
we don't want tattoos in the library.
Oh, she said that.
Very old-fashioned. It's a very old-fashioned outlook.
Oh.
She said, you got any piercings and have you got any tattoos? I said, I'm not going to divulge that.
Do you have any tattoos?
Yes, I do. But
What?
I'm not, again, I don't want to divulge that.
I'd love to know what tattoos you have.
I've got a tramp stamp. I've got a tribal tramp stamp.
Cool. Can I see?
We want to get on an interview Ian Livingstone.
I know, how exciting. Do you know what you're going to ask him yet?
Yeah.
What?
I'm going to say to him, Ian Livingstone, I presume.
Oh.
I'm not going to say that because I'm not brave enough, but I want to. That's what I want to say.
Well, now, if he ever watches the video back, he will see that that was your original intention.
Yeah. No, I'm going to ask him, where'd you get your ideas? That's the best interview question.
Let me have another look.
This is the episode we're interviewing Ian Livingstone on.
Let me have another
It's
look.
my
then.
fault. I know. I started it.
All right, let me have another look.
Have another look at my tramp stamp. Oh yeah, look, you see that?
Nice.
It's alright, it's tribal.
When I was pre-teen, it was all about Star Wars and you know, Doctor Who and the like. And then when I hit my teens, it was Fighting Fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, all of which you had involvement in to some degree or another. Do you have a sense of that kind of contribution you made to so many people's formative years?
Obviously not at the time, because we were just being effectively self-indulgent, trying to play games and get involved with promoting games that we enjoyed ourselves. But I mean, it became apparent over the years that we'd had quite a significant input into people's lives, and in a very positive way. I'm very humbled and delighted to hear that. I mean, the numbers of people I meet now who read Fighting Fantasy game books in the 80s and they're in their 40s and some even in their 50s who say set them on a career path. And what was so surprising, because at the time when they were launched, they were criticized because they weren't a normal book. They were a game book that was somehow trivial and perhaps harmful, as seen in the media. I mean, the Evangelical Alliance published an 8-page warning guide about Fighting Fantasy, saying because you're interacting with ghouls and demons, you're bound to get possessed by the devil. A housewife in deep suburbia phoned a local radio station, said, having read one of my books, her son levitated. Of course, all the kids thought, wow, for £1.50 we can fly. Amazing, we'll do that. The local vicar at Penguin Books, near Penguin Books, trying to chain himself to their railings until they were banned. There were petitions sent in, magazine articles written about the dangers of children using their imaginations too much. I mean, really? A vicar in the West Country telling his congregation to burn the books.
Wow.
I mean, it was hideous. And yet, at the same time, well, not straight away, but following that, where teachers were understanding that they were great for reluctant readers, inspire creative writing, critical thinking, especially in boys who are very reluctant readers, to break a book down into 400 paragraphs and give them the agency of choice and making decisions and really having a great time as a result of those choices. And if they got defeated, then you try again. They were just raising literacy levels by 20%, I've been told. And they got a whole generation of children reading, and some 20 million copies were sold. So it's only when you that drops into your mind that you really understand that actually these are very good, and they're in many ways the life skills. I mean, when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, effectively theatre on the fly, having this great social interaction with your friends. And games are defined as who we are as human beings. When we enter this world, we learn through play, and players are just a fantastic medium for fun and social interaction and learning. I mean, games for me are a contextual hub for learning. So there's so much good to be said about games, and role playing in particular, from, I just say, Fighting Fantasy, D&D, and Warhammer. And yet it was always misunderstood at the time, but it's only now that we're really understanding the real positive side of games as a medium, and in particularly Fighting Fantasy and D&D as being a great thing. And it's saying all the time, I'm meeting people saying, thank you very much you had a great positive influence on my life. And I get bored of it and say that.
Yeah, well, I'll add to that, because I mean, that's what I went on to do. I became a writer. I write for TV. And if it wasn't for Fighting Fantasy, they were the only books I read in my teens. And in fact, to the point that I did my O-level English literature final project on Death Trap Dungeon. And I got a B. So thank you for that. I mean, partly it was so I didn't have to read a whole book. Everyone else was doing To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, and I said no, I'll do Death Trap Dungeon. So
Death Trap Dungeon is a very popular one, obviously. I mean it was a bit wicked in a way, because you have to, as you well know, you have to befriend Throm the Barbarian to help get through the dungeon. Then suddenly you have to fight him to the death, which is a bit of a cruel twist, but people seem to have enjoyed it nevertheless. And I remember also, when talking about games being popular, I was on Saturday Superstore in the 80s, and they'd asked me to come on and talk through the top 10 books, children's bestsellers, and I had number 1, 2, and 3 at the time.
Wow!
I was being interviewed by John Craven, and he started at number 10 and working up and saying, you know, what was good about this book or that book. And we finally got to 321. And, you know, his question was, you know, when are you going to write a proper book? I mean,
Right.
that kind of stuff was so frustrating when you know you're having a great effect on children's imaginations and they're really enjoying reading. What's not to like?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was it for me. It was what got me. It was Fighting Fantasy comics. You know, they kind of it sparked my imagination and taught me how to read. So, what were your pre kind of, I suppose, being an adult? What were your interests? Were you always into kind of fantasy and that kind of thing?
I played a lot of games, but they were pretty boring when I was young. I mean, Monopoly was okay, but so I used to play Formula One and Ludo and Risk, and then I discovered diplomacy in the 60s. But I was a huge comic reader as a kid,
right?
And also became a big science fiction reader. You know, Worlds of Wonder were my natural go-to place.
Yeah,
so I've always had a pretty good imagination. Maybe that's to do with being an only child. You know, you end up thinking a lot and dreaming a lot because no one to talk to. But yeah, all myths and mythology, and from Arthurian to Greek to Roman, tales of dragons and alternate worlds is great. Wow. And of course, Tolkien.
So how did that then sort of segue into starting Games Workshop? You obviously quite clearly have a love for games, just looking at your background there.
Yeah, well, as at school in Altrincham, two school friends, John Peake and Steve Jackson, and I had moved down to London at separate times and ended up sharing a flat in Shepherd's Bush. And we had pretty poorly paid jobs, but we played a lot of board games as a sort of, you know, staying in and have a bit of fun other than just talking. And the conversation just came around about, you know, how can we turn this love of playing games into some sort of fledgling business? And that's really how it started. And that John was a civil engineer, but he was also a pretty good carpenter, and he made some wooden board games, which I sold and Steve did the admin for. At the same time, we started a small fanzine called Owl and Weasel, trying to reach out to the games community of the time. And we sent out like 50 copies to everybody we knew in games. And one copy, although we hadn't sent it to him directly, landed on the desk of Gary Gygax in the States, who wrote back to us and said, "Love your magazine. Is this new game designed and published? What do you think?" And that was Dungeons and Dragons, and it didn't look much, you know, a sort of plain box and with 3 largely unintelligible rule books. For, you know, that game opened up your imagination like no game had ever done before, and I don't think any game ever will. And we became obsessed with D&D.
Right.
That was Steve and I. John less so, and John ended up leaving Workshop. But in the meantime, Steve and I built up this kind of mail order business, and finally went full-time in 76, went over to the States to meet Gary Gygax, signed up all the fledgling games companies of the time, came back to the UK, had nowhere to live, no money, and ended up living in a van for 3 months.
Wow.
Steve's van, and renting a tiny office at the back of an estate agent, and joined the local squash club so we could have a shave, a shower, and etc. in the morning, and then doing our mail orders. And that went out on pretty hand to mouth for a couple of years until we finally had enough reserve to be able to open our first shop in 1978 in Hammersmith. I mean, this is kind of the origin story of Games Workshop. You know, I don't know if you know, but I wrote a book last year called Dice Men.
Yeah, I've just bought it on Kindle. So
I mean, you get all the kind of warts and all story when you read Dice Men, but it was really exciting times. I mean, we were making it as we went along, made loads of mistakes, but it was the kind of birth of the British hobby games industry at that time, and we loved it. And when you're passionate about something, you know, even though you sleep in the van, it's not hardship because you're having such a laugh, and the excitement overruled any of the kind of adversity.
So if it wasn't for D&D, I guess, did that directly lead to the first Fighting Fantasy book? Is that
indirectly? Yes, we were agents. We ordered 6 copies of D&D from Gygax, and on the back of that small order, he gave us an exclusive 3-year distribution agreement for the whole of Europe, because he was also operating out of his flat.
Right.
He was just happy to have a British distributor, even though we'd only ordered 6 copies. And then we used to run these games conventions called Games Day. And in 1979, we had one at the Seymour Hall, central London. And we had other trade stands there, one of which was Penguin Books. And the editor, Geraldine Cook, was bemused by the enthusiasm of literally a couple of thousand people playing D&D. And she came over to Steve and I and said, this is amazing. Would you be prepared to write a book about the hobby of D&D and role-playing games? And we said, rather off the cuff, or rather than writing a book about the hobby, why don't you write a book that allows you to experience a role-playing adventure? And she said, that sounds great. Send in a synopsis, and really thought about it.
Beyond that.
So we set about trying to distill the essence of a role-playing game into a book format, replacing the dungeon master with the book. And obviously you have to restrict it to multiple choice. And of course we wanted a game system attached, so it's kind of branching narrative with a simple game system of just 3 attributes, as you know: skill, stamina, and luck. And we just decided to make quite relatively short paragraphs, but each with the important thing at the end. The choices given had to have real consequences, so that decision was important to the reader. And of course, our job was trying to lure people to their doom, to fall on poison spikes or fried by a drink, whilst the readers tried over and over again to get through the adventures. So we did that and submitted it to Geraldine. Apparently, a senior management at Penguin Books dismissed it out of hand at first, the idea of a branching narrative book. And apparently the MD laughed so hard he's banged his head on the table, but it's an interesting bit of folklore. But anyway, Warlock of Firetop Mountain came out in 1982, so 2.5 years after her getting excited about the idea. And didn't sell at first because it looked like a normal book, but it was obviously quite different. And the salespeople at Penguin didn't really understand what it was. It didn't do any marketing. We wrote about it in White Dwarf magazine. But then a few schools picked up on it, and the virality of the day was obviously word of mouth in the playgrounds, and that kind of linked to another school, so this network effect of virality through school playgrounds was how Fighting Fantasy took off. And so I think that Penguin reprinted Warlock about 10 times in the first couple of months, till they finally became believers and said, can you write two more? So Steve wrote Citadel of Chaos and I wrote Forest of Doom. And then in 1983, it was really flying then. So I wrote and City of Thieves, and then 84 with Deathtrap Dungeon and Island of the Lizard King. And it was difficult then for ourselves, our lives at that time, because we were running Games Workshop during the day, which was now a serious business. And then going home to our now respective homes, writing Final Fantasy game books. So it was amazing, but quite stressful time. Having to go on world tours, doing author tours and stuff to the States and Japan and Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe. It was just mad. And yet there was no internet, so that there wasn't much noise about Fighting Fantasy in the mainstream press at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was, for me, like most people, it was playground. It was word of mouth. I think I remember seeing Warlock of Firetop Mountain, a friend having a copy, and just thinking, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is what I want.
I think art played an important part, because Puffin, being a children's imprint, showed us a cover, and it's like, really tame. It was like a toadstool with some goblins sitting on it, some butterflies milling around. And we said, no. We've been running workshop for 7 years doing D&D. You'd need a cover that kind of threatens to rip their faces off. And so we convinced them, and to their credit, they allowed us to use Games Workshop artists. So that's why we had amazing people like Ian McCaig and Martin McKenna and John Blanche and all the other people who just created that. Chris Achilles created that really dark, gritty realism of fantasy world that people liked. And the kids were scared, inverted commas, but they could tell the difference between fantasy and reality, and they weren't really scared. It was just excited them.
Yeah, it was the art for me was I think a huge part of it, and that would normally impact which books I got. So I think Death Trap Dungeon was the one that first jumped out at me, and then Freeway. Oh, geez, what was it? It was the Mad Max
cover painted by Jim Burns, who he's just the master of that kind of super realism. The way he does chrome is ridiculous.
That was it. It was the chrome.
It's like Forrest of Doom, Ian McCaig, that kind of art.
So talking about that though, Freeway Fighter. Why? I mean, I guess it was just the genre, but why didn't you do sort of more sci-fi books? Why was it mainly fantasy?
Steve did more outside of fantasy than I did. He did Starship Traveler and Appointment with Fear and others, but I just like the worlds of fantasy. Maybe I'd read too much Tolkien, I don't know. But being a D&D avid player, all the stuff in my head was related to fantasy, and it just kind of worked well with the audience who were also into D&D and role-playing games, and they would just end up being more popular fantasy scenarios than other genres like science fiction. You kind of limit your audience, and post-apocalyptic again is a limited audience, but fantasy, everyone enjoys fantasy worlds. No one ever tires of hearing about dragons and treasure and adventures and danger.
I wanted to talk to you as well about something that again had another influence on me and sort of stuck in my mind, and that was Eureka, which was your first foray into video games. How did that come about?
Well, that's down to Death Trap Dungeon. It was #1 in the bestsellers charts, and the co-founders of a startup video game developer publisher called Domark came knocking on my door and said, would I write their launch product? So I said, sure. And not knowing what I was letting myself in for. Here we go again. I can't program, but I can design an adventure. So it ended up being programmed in Hungary, a company called Andromeda, because there was a £25,000 prize offered. Complete the adventure and end up with a phone number, which if you dialed would end up on a recording machine in a solicitor's office, and you won 25 grand. So that was a great experience, and that's really how I got into video games myself. When I sold out of Workshop in 1991, I joined Domark and invested in the company. Realized it was a really bad time because this was early 90s. It's just when the 16-bit market was about to fall off the edge of a cliff. So we decided to put 4 companies together to create Newco IDOS, which we floated on the London Stock Exchange in 95. And of course, we acquired Centigold in 1996, the only other publicly quoted company in the space. And with Centigold came Core Design, and with Core Design came Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which we published in October 96. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. Do you remember that moment when you first laid eyes on Tomb Raider?
Yeah. It's when we were acquiring Centigold. It was March. I think it was March 96. We're talking about 96, and I was doing the due diligence on the studios, so into Silicon Dreams. I think they were near Banbury at the time, and then drove over in snow. I remember thinking twice about going over to Derby to meet Jeremy Heath Smith, who was the managing director of Core Design. Really nice guy, and full of life, and showed me all the games in development in the various rooms. And it was almost the last room we went into was in that very stereotypical corny phrase, love at first sight. Seeing Lara Croft on screen, because for start off, being used to seeing the games of that time were mainly 2D side-scrolling games, and this is one of the very first games I'd ever seen with a 3D character moving into 3D world. The great technology, amazing graphics. In fact, with the technology, you can actually move the camera up and down, giving that sort of incredible view. And of course, a female character who was strong, intelligent, athletic, independent. Just kind of all the stars were aligned, and you just knew deep down that this incredible team called. Just 6 people, I think it was at the time, with a character designed by Toby Gard, the artist there, and we're designing a future iconic games franchise, effectively.
But before you got there, it came out on the Saturn first, because that's where I played it initially. It was, and then it became synonymous with Sony and the PlayStation.
Sony wanted exclusivity, so they kind of made an offer in terms of minimum guarantees. And software sells hardware, and it's because of Tomb Raider and Wipeout that the PlayStation really took off, I think.
Yeah, I think it was those two, which they had a kind of coolness about them that, you know, not every other console could enjoy. So talking of enjoying things, which period of your career would you say you've enjoyed the most?
I'm still enjoying it.
This one, right now.
I mean, I don't like looking back too much. I guess like everyone, we like a bit of nostalgia. But I'm still very much involved with the games now. You know, I invest as an angel. I'm too old to run stuff. You can leverage 47 years of pattern recognition and pass that on to the developers of the day. And so I'm investing in quite a few studios, both as an individual and also as a part of a VC fund called Hero Capital.
Mm-hmm.
The last one I did as an individual was a game called Kinseed by Pixel Count. Just came out last year. Really wonderful, immersive, open world RPG, sandbox RPG. It's fantastic. Anyway, but getting to answer your question, I think it's the time perhaps with the most busiest, when Workshop was booming and Fighting Fantasy was flying and becoming this kind of world phenomenon, and it was just so exciting at the time that everybody wanted a bit of you and not knowing what to do next and things. And Penguin, we need more books. Can you go to Australia? What about workshops? Brian Ansell saying, we need more working capital to expand the Citadel miniatures, and White Dwarf magazine, we need blah, blah. And it was just whoa, and let's open another shop while we're at it.
So, I mean, I was going to ask you about that, and just sort of coming to an end now. That pattern recognition that you mentioned, is that because you seem to have been involved in so many things that have been so successful and so game changing? How? I mean, that's probably just my question. Just how do you kind of have got it right so many times?
Well, for starters, I'm working in an industry which is my hobby. I kind of understand gameplay innately. It doesn't make me a great game maker myself, but it makes me know what good looks like as much as anybody, I would hope. And then the psychology of human behavior as well. I mean, I won't get too deep into it about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of tick boxes in terms of warmth and building and crafting and personalization, all these things that human instinct you can get out of certain games. So I think, and the social interaction that everyone's always involved. You're not kind of hanging around on your own waiting for stuff to happen. All these things kind of mix around in my head when I'm looking at a game's potential and ideas and where the industry might go. Of course, the video games industry is driven by advances in technology. So all you can do is wait to see what next platform is going to take hold and scale to global audiences. But yeah, there's never been a better time, I don't think, than now for the games industry. And it's a $250 billion industry, 3 billion people playing it. Yeah, the choices in the 90s was restricted to kind of basic consoles and PCs, and then the horsepower, all those got bigger to ride. So now we have these AAA cinematic interactive experiences. Then Facebook became a platform. Obviously, smartphones became a huge platform. 50% of revenue is coming from smartphones, then AR, VR, esports, and now everyone's talking about the metaverse, and it's Roblox, it's Fortnite and metaverse. It's going to be an open metaverse. What's Mark Zuckerberg going to do about it? There's just extraordinary opportunities at every turn, and because games have become games as service, served through the internet, free at the point of delivery often, and any person can reach a global audience with a game now and monetize their content. So the traditional barriers, the gatekeepers of distribution when you're building physical inventory and having to sell it at a premium price, are no longer standing in the way of games makers. So these are amazing times. And also, of course, let's not forget that board games has had a huge resurgence in many ways. Ironically, because of the internet, that's enabled games to be made that would not have been made before. Back in my day, if an individual designer wanted to make their own game, they print 5,000 copies, of which 4,950 would be in the garage because they didn't distribution channels. But today with Kickstarter, you can effectively, the market telling you whether your idea is any good or not, pre-sell it and serve a global audience. At the same time, you can learn how to play on Dice Tower. You can see every game that's ever been published on BoardGameGeek.com. You can play digitally on Board Game Arena. And of course, e-commerce allows you to buy games without having to be near a game shop physically. So the whole digital ecosystem around board games has really enabled the growth and expansion of board games. And there's been a revival in Fighting Fantasy. I think we've also seen that with vinyl and even CDs, and people want a bit more physical entertainment in their lives as well as digital entertainment. So I think there's a bit of a balancing going on right now, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, I rebought Warlock of Firetop Mountain, although I'm very disappointed that the dice are now on the pages and you got to flip through. I used to like the physicality of.
It doesn't matter. You only cheated anyway. Let's go.
That's very true. That's very true. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Ian, for agreeing to this. And I just want to reiterate, I mean, it's surreal for me to be talking to you, realizing kind of just, you had that sort of disembodied parent role in my life. Where you probably shaped me as much as my mum and dad ever did. So, thank you so much. And thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Ian, living legend, more like.
Ian, sword in the stone, Livingstone, because he's such a rare treasure.
I mean,
he's like a sword in the stone.
I don't think that's better than my Ian living legend, but fine. You wanted your own one.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Right, that's it then for this week. Thank you to Ian for doing that. That was very much appreciated. We are doing a live show in the summer.
Yes, how exciting is that?
Maybe Ian Livingstone will be there.
But he can come if he wants to.
He can come if he wants to, but he probably won't. Tickets and whatnot are in the description below. It's 2 nights, 2 different nights. Come along and join us, like lots of people already are, and make some memories. Support us on Patreon if you want, www.patreon.com/MrBiffo, where you get stuff early this week, or recently. they're getting,
we don't know
when it's going out or when this one's going out.
It's all a mystery. Anything can happen anytime.
We're doing Q&As with our patrons, special exclusive videos and stuff, as well as other things. That's it. Okay, thanks for watching, and subscribe, like, blah 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 blah. Bye.
Bye.
So why don't you come on down to the library where we've got lots of books that you can borrow, and just don't let the witch put a curse on you.
Well, how do you avoid that?
Well, don't threaten her by being sort of younger and more dynamic than she is what I'd say. Don't come out and make any suggestions for ideas for interesting evenings. Come on down to the library.